She's an award-winning YouTuber and best-selling author obsessed with helping you go after the life you want.
I like it.
Join her as she seeks out the stories and strategies
Give me every little detail
of extraordinary people who found success.
I'm going to get emotional. Oh my God.
Welcome to Detail Therapy with Amy Landino.
Good morning, good life. Welcome back to another episode of Detail Therapy. In this one, we're going to get into the details about self-doubt. Where does it freaking come from? What is the deal with it? And how do we stop it from holding us back from seeing our dreams come to life? I have 5 small changes you can make specifically with your mindset that are going to help you to prevent this huge issue from taking over your life. Can we completely stop self-doubt? No, it's part of our nature to entertain both sides of an idea, but we need to get out of the habit of making it such a regular thing to stay in the negative and look toward what is possible. If you are new here, hello, my name is Amy Landino. I will be your host. I'm the founder of GATLU, which stands for Go After the Life You Want. We create resources for ambitious professionals who are ready to unleash their power, get unstuck, and create the life of their dreams. When you visit detailtherapy.online, you'll not only find videos, books, podcasts, show notes for this podcast and all of the above, but you can get details about our new daily motivational podcast, which you can get instant access to right now when you join our premium community, Shine Squad. Just tap the notes in your podcast player for links to everything I mentioned, or again, you can visit detailtherapy.online. So, what's the deal with self-doubt? We feel so debilitated by this all the time. Every morning, a little bit of something creeps in, and the more we go and do the wrong things that build up the flame of self-doubt, the more it continues to consume us and makes us really not have any of that self-belief that we need in order to take small steps in the right direction. But did you know that self-doubt grows from limiting beliefs? We talk about limiting beliefs, and sometimes they sound like they're synonymous with each other, but I really want you to see them as a little bit different. One is a cause, one is an effect, okay? The cause being limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs are those restrictions, the excuses, and just some rules that we have learned or were taught. They're not always delivered in the way that we think. Sometimes limiting beliefs are from our upbringings. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's not from our parents or our home surroundings. Sometimes it's in social settings. And you'll probably remember times in your life when something shifted for you and maybe you developed a complex or developed an insecurity from one particular moment in your life. And that is where we start to see limiting beliefs get created for ourselves. They can also be way less traumatic than that. They can just be the ways of the world that happened in our immediate surroundings that we just came to know. This is usually the case with money for a lot of people. Your beliefs about money and wealth and greed and debt and that kind of thing, they tend to develop around the ideas that you were taught based on how people conducted themselves around you and what their beliefs were and their limiting beliefs. Maybe they had self-belief, maybe they had limiting beliefs, maybe it was a combination of both. And maybe they really felt good about how they conducted themselves with money, or give any other example you can think of. And you just grew up believing all of those things as well. But we find these, again, restrictions, these excuses, these rules built into those limiting beliefs that have caused us to not expand to our greatest potential where we are today. So as you're considering your self-doubt, things that you are saying to yourself you cannot do, things that you are saying to yourself are probably impossible, things that you're saying to yourself are not typical of people who are like you, these are all the effect of limiting beliefs that you have been taught or have learned over a period of time. It's not about blaming anyone. It's not about pinpointing exactly where it happened, although sometimes the development of that and understanding the beginnings of that feeling and that belief can be helpful for working through it. But that's not what we're all about today. We just want to accept the fact that limiting beliefs happen. We can grow from them. We can identify them. We can learn something different, start to change the story, and therefore start to beat down some of this self-doubt that's just completely and totally not productive. Like, I would love for you to point out any self-doubt that you have that has been helpful for you. Can we just go ahead and agree that's probably not the case? Okay, so let's just talk about now knowing that the limiting beliefs are what start this whole issue with self-doubt. Let's talk about 5 things that you can do that are going to stop self-doubt from taking over your life. The first is to notice resistance. You see a lot of resistance in your life. You feel a lot of resistance in yourself. We often will feel resistance if we don't like how things are going or somebody asks us to do something we're not comfortable with. Notice that resistance. Resistance does not necessarily mean that you shouldn't be doing something. It also doesn't necessarily mean that you should be doing something. So it's important to recognize resistance for something that is very, very natural. It occurs to us. It makes us want to feel a certain kind of way because it's triggering something, but we need to reframe the conversation. So you need to notice resistance when it appears, but it doesn't necessarily mean one way or the other what the situation is. We're just noticing it because what we need to do, especially in the cases where that resistance is saying we shouldn't be doing something, we want to take the conversation from I can't and rephrase it into I must. And this is going to be a recurring theme a little bit throughout this, but what are you saying is I can't to, or what are you putting space in front of you from when it comes your way that's making you say, no, 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 no. That can be a good thing to identify, and especially if your gut is telling you to say no. But if it's something powerful that actually would be the key to seeing a really advantageous move in your goals, in your dreams come true, and you're feeling that resistance, we need to reframe the conversation. So if you know something could be great, if you know something could be amazing, if you know something could be you if you tried it, but you're getting that resistance and you feel I can't, observe the I can't, right? I can't speak on stage. I can't speak to thousands of people. That might be it, right? Or I can't become a millionaire, or I can't start my own business. And change the conversation because the resistance you're feeling, like, oh, well, that's interesting. Why is that popping up in my head? Why is that resistance there? Let's change the conversation just to see how a different story could go. I must speak on stage to thousands of people. I must become a millionaire. I must start my business. Why must you? Start to understand what that looks like. And again, we don't have to pick either one. Resistance is just a thing, okay? Stephen Pressfield said this in his book, Do the Work. He said, here's the rule of thumb. The more important a call to action is to our soul's evolution, the more resistance we will feel toward pursuing it. So if there's a call or an action that is actually very powerful within us, and we know in our heart it is pointing us in a productive and positive and amazing direction, but we feel that resistance, it's not only guaranteed that it's going to happen, it may also be indicating that you must break through and figure out how to go that way. So he also says, ignore false negatives and ignore false positives. They're both resistance. Just keep working. Do the work is the book, right? So we are just noticing resistance. This is the biggest thing. We usually look at resistance and decide that that is the answer. If I'm resisting something, I am not going to do it. And that is the quickest way to not growing. It is the quickest way to staying in our comfort zone. What he is saying here is that resistance is a given, especially if that calling is something that speaks to our soul. So identify the resistance and try a new conversation. If the resistance is, I can't, rephrase it to, I must. And when you do that, just see how the story plays out. But instead of considering it as the roadblock and the stopping point, we're just seeing resistance for what it is. It's going to show up in everything we do. Resistance shows up in procrastination. Resistance shows up in not trying new things. Resistance shows up when we're annoyed with someone who's interrupting our beautiful morning routine. Resistance shows up in all places. It is not a yes or a no. It just is. So notice resistance and flip the conversation on its head. If it's positive, if it's negative, flip the conversation on its head. Learn how you actually feel about the subject. The second small change to stop self-doubt is when you hear negativity. It could be negativity somebody is actually putting on to you about what you're doing or how you feel or how you're acting. Or it could just be negativity around you in general, okay? When you hear negativity, resist the urge to believe it and instead let someone else's story be theirs. The biggest point of resistance for me all the time is like, hey, I'm all woo-saw over here and I do my self-development and I read every day and I love my good morning, good life mantra to motivate me into the day and I'm doing this thing. So don't you come into my space and bring your drama because I'm good over here. I'm trying to stay good for as long as possible, right? That's one point of resistance for me all the time. And then I'll want to hear that negativity and dismiss it. But what actually is happening is we are not being a fully expressed version of ourselves when we decide that what we cannot control needs to be controlled. Okay, so that negativity happens even if they're coming for you. Again, that's going to be significantly harder. A lot easier if you're just letting somebody vent, right? But no matter what the negativity is about, when it's coming for you, just listen without believing the story until you have fundamentally shifted your beliefs. And if you're fundamentally shifting your beliefs to self-doubt, then definitely slow that process down at all costs because it's not going to be helpful. But we want to keep from believing it and instead watch the person for the story they are telling because it is their story. I cannot emphasize this enough. When someone says to me, wow, you move a lot. You can't move again. I just laugh. I do move a lot. It just happens. I've had a few houses. It is what it is. I can move if I want to. But the point of it is that someone is saying that the way they believe life should be done is that you have one house and you live there for your whole life. That's their story. They're telling their story to me by using me as an example. That's their decision. That's their observance, and that's okay. That is 100% okay. It becomes not okay when we turn it into a personal attack, because how easy would that be? It's so easy to turn that into a personal attack. They're literally using you as an example, Amy, you and your housing situation. But it's not about me. It's what someone else has believed, potentially a limiting belief. If you see that as a limiting belief, it's completely up to you. If you see that as a limiting belief, regardless, it's theirs. It's not mine. They're simply sharing it with me the way that they know best. And because it's for my best interest, that's the best part, is they're telling me this story because they feel so compelled. I tell you guys stories here on this podcast all the time because I feel so compelled. I want you to know these things that I have learned so that you can decide what to do with them. But they are my stories. They're what I have learned. And I'm just trying to educate to the best of my ability with my absolute best intentions in mind for you. But it's still my story that I'm telling you. You have to take it and say, okay, am I going to take this personally in a powerful and a positive way, or am I going to take this personally and now this conversation is going to get really uncomfortable with this person? You do not have to believe any negativity that comes your way. That's where things start to go wrong. Let me go on to small change number 3, because I think it's going to help you even more with this. Not only are we going to do that first one, we're going to hear negativity, and instead of believing it, we're going to let that story be someone else's. We're going to do small change number 3, which is to identify any guilt or shame that you have that's keeping you from doing what is called to you. This is so big right now. You cannot shame yourself or another human being into behaving differently. Shame does not create change. It doesn't. It just doesn't. No matter how much your self-doubt has actually been debilitating you and shame has played a role in that, shaming yourself is not going to make a change. It's just not. So that is why, let's say someone is shaming on some level or making you feel guilty, and again, it's their story. The problem, again, becomes if you've decided to believe that story. We have to stop believing so many dang stories. There's so many stories in this world. You can pick up a children's book, read a story. You can pick up a nonfiction book, you can read a story. You can pick up a fiction book, you can read a story. You can watch drama television, you can hear a story. And you start to learn all these stories. And then if you believe them as fact, that is where limiting beliefs are born. The fastest track to learning a story and believing it's true is feeling guilt and shame about something, and then someone else telling you how to feel or how to conduct yourself based around that same subject. You only believe negativity if you have guilt or shame around it. That's just the truth. That is just the truth. If someone tweeted you and said that you have a big forehead, happens in the world all the time, by the way. Not necessarily to me, but I don't know. There's always a first time for something. You're going to laugh your face off if you fundamentally don't believe that. You're like, I actually have a perfectly sized forehead, so thanks a lot, but whatever. But if you've actually had conversations with yourself about, you know what, I really wish my forehead looked differently, or I feel, I don't know if there's a guilt or shame or just a feeling of not being good enough in that. If you believe that, if someone tweets that to you, you're going to feel so shut down. The amount of self-doubt you'll have sounds so stupid when you say it out loud and you know it, but you can't help how you feel. And that's just that. But it's a story that you've already told yourself that matches a story to someone decided to say to you, which was theirs in the first place, never had to live in your world, that is making you feel self-doubt. So recognize that guilt and shame. Just find that and sit in that. We don't want to get so depressed and so negative with ourselves and make ourselves feel bad. But the fastest way to breaking down your issues are to face them head on and saying, I feel shame about money. I feel shame about family. I feel shame about my love life. I feel shame in all of these different, whatever areas trigger you the most. Identifying them so you can face them head on is vital, because no matter what anyone ever says to you about them, no matter what they come up with, no matter what terrible thing they say that might actually be super true because you have not started to work through those problems with yourself yet, they're going to break you down, and that self-doubt is going to grow. The only way to stop the self-doubt is for you to look at the problems, face them head on, and say what the real issue is. You have to identify that guilt. And another thing about guilt and shame here, just because someone's making you feel guilty doesn't necessarily mean that you feel shame around it. It's easy for someone to try to put a guilt trip on you, but the only way it becomes a real guilt trip is if you actually feel shame around something. Do you see what I'm getting at? So we can let the typical guilt trip roll off and let, again, that be someone else's story. When we're honest with ourselves about, well, do I feel ashamed about how much time I spend in my business, that it might be taking me away from certain things? No, I don't feel ashamed of that. Well, if you don't feel ashamed of that, then you can identify that guilt and let it go and say, okay, well, that doesn't apply. That just doesn't apply. This is the way I'm doing things for me. That's so big. That's a big one. That's like a whole podcast in and of itself. But if we really want to stop self-doubt, we have to understand how guilt and shame are rooted in so much of this. The fourth small change to stop self-doubt: spend less time worrying about the how and focus on the vision. We live in a world of an absolute plethora and unlimited access to information and to do anything, to do absolutely anything. And that's a beautiful thing. But it's also made us consumed so much with the nitty-gritty details and the how we're going to get something done. We are so blessed with the amount of how information. We'll have the how. We'll love to tell everybody the how. We will, I know how to lose 25 pounds. I know how. I'm just not. We'll love to deliver that information to whoever, because we have the how. We love to preach. I've got access. I've got this computer in my pocket. I can find that out right now. I've got the how. I can tell you right now how to do that. That feels good, but that doesn't actually help us in the area of self-doubt at all. You're not worried about how you're going to get something done. Fundamentally, that is not your concern. You know that you can find out how in a nanosecond. And even if the entire path is not painted for you, if you had a little bit of confidence, you know for a fact you would take the baby steps and you would let those steps reveal themselves as you go. You know that. The how is not the issue. The how becomes way more fun when the vision is clear. When you know why you're doing what you're doing. When you can say without a shadow of a doubt, you are in it to win it because you know what you want to see for yourself down the road. And that you're so excited to see that potentially happen that the process is just as exciting to you. Getting to the win is just as exciting to you. I talked about this in the last episode. You guys are so funny. All the tweets about the Range Rover are just cracking me up. You guys are hilarious. I love it. Again, I can't wait to have that car someday, but I can wait. I can. Because it's just that cool thing that I'm like working toward, and everything I'm doing in between that's helping me get to an energetic state where I'm like, yeah, now it's time. Everything I'm doing now gets me just as excited as the day that would come to life in my life. Like the day that would happen would be amazing. But everything in between is just as cool. That's just one little teeny tiny detail in my vision for my wonderful life that I'm working toward. And in the meantime, I still have an amazingly wonderful life because I'm chugging through small steps every day to bring positivity and better closer to me. I contemplate the conditions I want for my life, and they are happening more often because I choose to see them whether they're actually there or not. So if you are consumed with self-doubt because you're thinking, I don't know what the steps are, it's probably more coming from a place that you're worried about what the steps are because you don't want to encounter one you're not going to like that much. See point number 1 about resistance. The rule of thumb from Stephen Pressfield. The more important a calling is to your soul's evolution, the more resistance we will feel pushing toward it. You're worried about the steps because you're worried there's going to be one you're not going to like, and that's going to present resistance. But resistance is just a thing that exists, and it's probably indicating you're going in the right direction. I did a little speaking engagement this week. It was a little unconventional. There wasn't a stage. It was actually filmed for television. And I got to get interviewed. And the person who was being interviewed after me, I stuck around for a few minutes just to observe because I had never met him before, was Jim Quick. And he wrote an amazing book called Limitless. And he said something while he was being interviewed, and I wrote it down because I just loved it. He said, you want to move the conversation from how do I use this to why must I use this? Remember what I said earlier? Turn I can't into I must. You're flipping the story on its head. He's saying here, it's not just how do you use this? It's why must you use this? Because what happens is that takes it from a conversation in your head, which is where self-doubt lives. It's taking the conversation from your head and putting it in your heart. And if we're going after the life we want, I know you are, it's about what's in your heart. What do you actually feel for who you are and where you're going? We must find the calling within ourselves and be allowed to focus on it without conditions to give ourselves the best chance of moving forward. My final small change, number 5, to stop self-doubt. This one is just so big. It's something I have to grapple with every day. I have to write these words every day. I have to look at them every day. I had to have a life coach tell them to me, and I broke down when I really heard them and felt them. This is an ongoing issue in self-doubt for me, because what happens is if I don't observe this, if I don't feel this, if I don't let myself sit in this, I overdo it on myself. I actually over-execute. That's what I'm more likely to do. I'm more likely to over-execute because of enoughness. So number 5 is remind yourself that you are already enough. I don't care if you haven't done a single thing in your adult life to advance your cause or your world or your career or anything that you feel that you need to work on. I don't care if you've done nothing or less than nothing, or you've gone way backward because of mistakes you've made. I don't care. You are already enough. You do enough. You have enough. You are more than enough. And if we don't remind ourselves of that first and freaking foremost every day, we will get caught up in all the stories, all the guilt, all the shame, all the resistance, all the limiting beliefs, and self-doubt will be where we live forever. If you're like me, self-doubt comes from feeling like it's never enough. And whenever someone makes me feel that way, whenever someone says something to me and I interpret it as I am not enough, I am not doing enough, I am not showing enough effort, I am not enough, I do take that story to heart because that is a core issue for my guilt and shame. I have always had to combat that. It is not something that ever goes away. It is something you have to work on, because I do. So I don't want you to think that this was some get confident quick podcast. Confidence comes from taking the steps and collecting them along the way. I wasn't confident to be a business coach on day one, but I had to get that first client. I had to work with them. I had to get experience. And the more I flexed the muscle, the more I learned, the more I worked with people, the more confident I got. That's the only way confidence happens. Your relation to self-doubt is not a ratio that's equivalent to that confidence going up. If your self-doubt goes down, confidence doesn't go up. It depends on what it is. But if your self-doubt goes down, your self-belief does go up. And we need that self-belief, and we need to know we are enough, because that's what's going to help us with the vision so that we will do the how. Doing the how, doing the steps, that's what builds confidence. So let's get to the heart of the biggest thing holding us back, that ball and chain that is self-doubt, and take these 5 steps into consideration. First, notice resistance. Change the conversation from I can't to I must. Second, when you hear negativity, resist the urge to believe and instead let that be someone else's story. Let them tell that story, no matter who they're using as the example in that story. Number 3, identify the guilt and shame you have that is keeping you from trying the thing, keeping you from feeling that you believe in yourself. Number 4, spend less time worrying about the how and focus on that vision, that dream. And number 5, remind yourself that you are already enough. I hope this was helpful for you today with your self-doubt journey on your way to more self-belief. Thank you so much for being here. All the details for how you can continue to have more self-belief with us in Shine Squad is in the links in the show notes. So check that out at amytvshinesquad.com. And if you found this podcast helpful, it would be amazing if you would do a little share on your Instagram, tag me. I love to see the takeaways that you get from these shows and what we can continue to talk about in the future. That's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it as always. Remember, subscribe for good vibes, kiss the ones you love, and go after the life you want. I'll see you back here on Tuesday. Cheers.